The family who owned the mansion was polite, but distant. They moved through the halls with an almost mechanical precision, their eyes always alert and their words sparse. The first few days passed with a strange monotony. Lila cleaned room after room, dusting chandeliers, polishing silver, and scrubbing floors that seemed impervious to her efforts. But the silence of the mansion began to weigh on her. At odd hours, she thought she heard footsteps above her, doors creaking open and then closing again, whispers she could not place. Despite the fear creeping along her spine, she reminded herself that old houses made strange noises. That had to be all it was. Still, she couldn't shake a growing curiosity. Each night, as she went to sleep in her small quarters tucked away near the servants' wing, she imagined what could be hidden behind the mansion's locked doors and shadowed corridors. One door, in particular, drew her attention: the basement. The heavy wooden barrier was secured with a rusted padlock and seemed older than the rest of the house. The family never mentioned it, and whenever she asked innocently about it, their answers were vague or dismissive. A chill ran through her as she realized how carefully they avoided the subject. Lila knew, deep down, that the mansion's grandeur masked something far darker than dust and silence. She crouched and pressed her ear to the door. The muffled groans she had heard before were clearer now, unmistakably human. Her stomach twisted in fear, but something else rose inside her, a strange sense of purpose. The figure in the corner stirred as Lila's light fell on him. Chains clinked softly, their dull sound echoing against the damp stone walls. He was gaunt, his face pale and shadowed, but his eyes burned with something that made Lila's breath catch, a mixture of intelligence, defiance, and a raw, dangerous energy that she had only seen in stories about powerful men. He was not an ordinary prisoner. The papers scattered around him, yellowed and crumpled, contained names, dates, and locations, sketches of people and properties that seemed to map an intricate network far beyond the confines of the mansion. Lila realized with a jolt that she was looking at a man who once held immense power, someone who had commanded fear and loyalty across the country. She swallowed hard, heart hammering as she stepped closer. The air in the basement was thick and suffocating, carrying the metallic tang of rust and sweat. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to leave this place immediately, but something inside her held her there, rooted. She could sense the story behind this man, a story tangled in deception, betrayal, and violence. It was impossible to ignore. Whoever he was, he had been reduced to this chains, darkness, and silence. Yet there was a tension about him, a coiled energy that hinted he was not entirely defeated. Lila noticed documents scattered across the floor, some pinned beneath broken furniture, others hidden in cracks along the walls. They detailed meetings, bribes, and transactions that clearly tied him to organized crime. She scanned one sheet with trembling hands, lists of names with strange symbols beside them, addresses marked with ominous codes. Her stomach churned as she pieced together the reality. The family she worked for had imprisoned this man deliberately, keeping him here as leverage, as a tool in a game of criminal power that Lila could barely comprehend. The man's eyes followed her movements, calculating and sharp. Lila had no doubt he understood her fear and curiosity, but he made no move to speak, no plea for help, only a quiet intensity that made her pulse quicken. She noticed bruises along his wrists and ankles, evidence of long confinement and perhaps resistance. The chains rattled lightly as he shifted, reminding her how fragile the line between life and death could be in this place. She realized that every second she stayed in the basement, she was stepping deeper into danger. A cold shiver ran down her spine as she looked around. Every detail in the basement told a story. A hastily discarded meal, a book with pages torn out, sketches of faraway cities, and maps marked with coded routes. The more she saw, the more she understood the magnitude of what she had uncovered. This man was a key figure, someone whose influence had once shaped criminal operations, now lying captive in a mansion that outwardly seemed harmless. Her mind raced. If the family discovered she knew, or if she tried to leave without caution, she could become a target. Yet the pull to help him, to uncover the truth, was stronger than fear. Lila understood that unlocking the basement had opened a door not just to this man, but to a dark and dangerous world she had never imagined. Every shadow seemed to whisper warnings, but also secrets, and she felt, with a mix of dread and resolve, that her life would never be the same again. After discovering the truth hidden in the basement, Lila could no longer see the mansion in the same way. Every hallway felt narrower. Every polished surface seemed to conceal something rotten beneath. The family she served each day now appeared calculated and watchful. Their movements were controlled, their expressions carefully neutral, as if emotion itself was a weakness they had trained themselves to erase. Lila began to notice patterns she had ignored before late-night arrivals of black vehicles, heavy footsteps echoing through the house after midnight, and rooms that were always locked, no matter the hour. While cleaning one of the rarely used study rooms, Lila made another terrifying discovery. Behind a false panel in a bookshelf, she uncovered leather-bound ledgers and sealed envelopes filled with photographs. The documents outlined years of illegal dealings, money laundering through property investments, connections to foreign crime syndicates, and coded payments tied to violent operations across the UK. The scale of it left her dizzy. This was not a family with secrets. This was a criminal empire, operating quietly behind wealth and respectability. As she continued reading, a darker truth emerged. The imprisoned man in the basement had once been a partner, not an enemy. He had helped build the network, expanding influence across borders. But greed had fractured the alliance. The family had betrayed him, locking him away to erase his authority while keeping him alive as insurance. His existence was proof of their crimes, and his silence was enforced by chains and isolation. Layla realized the danger she was now in. Knowledge made her vulnerable. A single wrong step, a misplaced glance, or a moment of hesitation could expose her. She became hyper-aware of her surroundings, listening carefully to every conversation, memorizing routines, and noting who entered and left the house. The mansion was no longer just a workplace. It was a trap designed to test loyalty and punish curiosity. The family began watching her more closely. Their eyes lingered longer when she entered a room. Simple instructions were repeated unnecessarily, as if testing her reactions. Layla understood that trust did not exist here, only usefulness. Anyone who outlived their value disappeared quietly. The basement was proof of that. At night, sleep abandoned her. Every sound made her heart race. She knew too much, and ignorance was no longer an option. Late one night, when the mansion seemed wrapped in an uneasy stillness, Layla felt the pressure of her secret reaching a breaking point. The knowledge she carried was too heavy, too dangerous to keep buried. Each glance from the family felt sharper, more suspicious, and she sensed that her time was running out. The basement, once merely a place of dread, now felt like the center of everything. Whatever happened next would begin there. She waited carefully, observing routines with growing precision. The household followed strict patterns. Security checks at fixed hours, lights turned off wing by wing, guards shifting positions just before dawn. Layla memorized these details while performing her duties, her face calm even as her mind raced. She understood that any attempt to help the captive man would be reckless unless timed perfectly. Fear no longer paralyzed her. It sharpened her focus. When the moment came, the mansion was unusually quiet. A storm rolled in outside, wind rattling the windows and masking subtle sounds. Layla moved through the corridors with controlled steps, carrying cleaning supplies to avoid suspicion. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached the basement door, but she forced herself to breathe steadily. Every second felt stretched, as though the house itself was watching. Inside the basement, the air felt heavier than before. The man was exactly where she had last seen him, weakened but alert. Layla examined the chains carefully, noting the rusted links and loose bolts she had missed earlier. Over the past few days, she had quietly collected tools, nothing that would raise concern, nothing that could be traced directly to her. Each item now felt like a gamble between survival and disaster. Working slowly, she loosened a weakened shackle, careful to minimize noise. The metallic scrape echoed softly, sending a jolt of fear through her chest. Sweat formed along her temples as she continued, every sound magnified in her mind. A sudden vibration pulsed through the floor, followed by a low mechanical hum. An alarm had been triggered. Panic surged through Layla as distant footsteps thundered above. The family security system, far more advanced than she had realized, had detected the disturbance. Lights flickered, casting erratic shadows across the basement walls. Layla reacted instinctively. pushing debris aside and guiding the man toward a darker corner concealed behind old storage shelves. Flashlights swept across the room, beams cutting through darkness, searching for signs of escape. Lila pressed herself into the shadows, heart pounding so violently she feared it would betray her. The search felt endless. Every breath was a risk. Then, just as suddenly as they had arrived, the guards retreated, convinced nothing was amiss. The door slammed shut, leaving the basement once again in silence. Layla remained frozen long after they were gone. The failed escape had changed everything. The mansion was now alert, and the danger had doubled. After the failed escape, the mansion seemed to tighten its grip on everyone inside. Security was increased immediately. Additional guards appeared in the corridors. Cameras were repositioned, and access to certain areas was quietly restricted. The family acted as if nothing unusual had happened, yet the tension in the air was unmistakable. Leela could feel it in the way doors closed faster, in the way conversations stopped when she entered a room. The house was no longer just watching her. It was testing her. Lila understood that another reckless attempt would end her life. If she wanted to survive, she needed leverage. She began paying closer attention to the documents she had already discovered, revisiting them in her mind, connecting patterns she had missed before. Names repeated themselves across different ledgers, some marked with subtle symbols, others crossed out entirely. These were not random notes. They were signs of internal conflict. While cleaning a rarely used storage room beneath the east wing, Lila found more evidence hidden inside a locked trunk. Inside were encrypted messages, burner phones, and photographs of men who were clearly not part of the family. Some images were marked with dates and locations tied to violent incidents reported in the news. It became clear that the family was not united. Power within their empire was fractured, split between competing interests that barely tolerated each other. Lila realized the imprisoned man was not just a hostage. He was a bargaining chip. His existence threatened certain members of the family while protecting others. If exposed to the right people, his survival could destroy the family from within. This knowledge gave Lila something she had lacked since arriving at the mansion: control. She began to act carefully, subtly feeding information where it would cause the most tension. A document left slightly visible. A storage room left unlocked. A coded message placed where it would be noticed by the wrong eyes. Each action was small, almost invisible, but together they began to create cracks. She noticed arguments behind closed doors, raised voices quickly silenced, guards reassigned without explanation. Something was shifting. At the same time, Lila prepared herself. She memorized escape routes she had once dismissed as decorative hallways. She noted which walls were newer, which floors sounded hollow beneath her steps. She discovered ventilation paths that connected sections of the mansion few people ever entered. The house was no longer a mystery. It was a map. The man in the basement remained silent, but Lila sensed his awareness growing. He understood the danger without being told. Every night she lay awake, imagining how close she was to failure. One wrong move could expose everything. Yet fear no longer controlled her. Strategy had replaced it. The closer Lila came to uncovering the mansion's deepest secrets, the more the past began to bleed into the present. One afternoon, while cleaning the upper floor rarely used by the family, she discovered a narrow corridor hidden behind a sliding wall panel. At the end of it was a small archive room, untouched by time, filled with locked cabinets and faded boxes. The air inside was stale, heavy with forgotten memories. Something about the space felt personal, as if it had been preserved for a reason no one wanted to remember. Inside one of the cabinets, Lila found photographs neatly arranged in labeled envelopes. As she examined them, a cold shock ran through her body. Several images showed a young girl standing near locations she vaguely recognized, though she had no memory of being there. The girl was her. The dates written on the backs of the photographs predated her arrival at the mansion by many years. Her hands trembled as she flipped through them, her breath shallow and unsteady. This was no coincidence. It never had been. Further documents revealed adoption records, financial transfers, and surveillance notes connected to her childhood. The family had been watching her long before she applied for the job. Her upbringing, her financial struggles, even her employment history had been monitored. She had not found the mansion by chance. She had been guided to it. The realization struck her with crushing force. Her life had been shaped quietly, deliberately, by people who saw her as a tool rather than a person. As the pieces fell into place, Lila understood the final layer of deception. Her parents' sudden disappearance years ago, the unanswered questions she had buried to survive, were tied to the same criminal network. They had not vanished by accident. They had been removed. The family had tested her resilience from afar, waiting to see if she would break or adapt. Her role was never meant to be simple obedience. It was evaluation. The man in the basement was connected to her past as well. Records showed he had once argued against eliminating her family, seeing value in loyalty over cruelty. That decision had cost him his power and eventually his freedom. The family had locked him away, not just for betrayal, but for mercy. Lila felt the weight of that truth settle heavily in her chest. Everything she had uncovered pointed to a single horrifying conclusion. She had been brought here to decide the fate of a man who had once saved her life without ever meeting her. The knowledge shattered her sense of identity. Fear, anger, and grief collided inside her, threatening to overwhelm her. Yet beneath the turmoil, something stronger emerged: clarity. The family believed they controlled outcomes, that they could mold people like pieces on a board. They had underestimated what years of quiet struggle could create. Lila no longer saw herself as trapped. She saw herself as positioned. The mansion, the secrets, the alliances, and the man in chains were all part of the test she never agreed to take. But now that she understood the rules, she was no longer playing their game. She was preparing to end it. The final night arrived without warning, cloaked in an uneasy calm that felt unnatural even for the mansion. The air was heavy, pressing down on Lila as if the house itself sensed what was about to happen. The fracture she had carefully created within the family's empire had reached a breaking point. Guards moved nervously, routes changed without explanation, and whispers echoed through corridors that once held rigid order. Something was unraveling, and everyone felt it. Lila moved with purpose. Fear was still there, but it no longer ruled her. She followed the path she had memorized in silence, through forgotten hallways and down narrow service stairs that led beneath the oldest part of the estate. The basement no longer felt like a place of horror. It felt like an ending. Using the tools and access she had prepared over weeks, she freed the man from the last of his restraints. His strength was fading, but his resolve was unbroken. He understood what this moment meant without needing explanation. Hidden beneath a steel panel behind the wine storage, Lila revealed the entrance to the tunnels she had discovered earlier. They stretched far beyond the mansion grounds, remnants of old wartime construction repurposed for secrecy and escape. As they moved through the darkness, alarms suddenly erupted above them. The family had realized too late that control had slipped through their hands. Sirens cut through the night air, not just from the estate, but from far beyond it. The information Lila had quietly released had reached authorities and rivals alike. The empire was collapsing from all sides. As they neared the final tunnel exit, the truth of the situation became clear. Armed footsteps thundered behind them, closing in fast. Escape for both of them was no longer possible. In a final act that sealed his fate, the man turned back, drawing attention to himself and forcing the pursuit away from Lila. He used the last of his strength to trigger a collapse within the tunnel system, blocking the path behind her. Lila emerged alone into the cold night, gasping for air as the sound of chaos erupted in the distance. Police vehicles flooded the countryside roads, their lights cutting through the darkness like judgment. The mansion burned with activity, its secrets finally exposed after decades of silence. The man who had once ruled through fear had chosen to end his life, reclaiming control in the only way left to him. By dawn, everything was over. The family was arrested, their wealth frozen, their influence shattered. News reports spoke of a vast criminal network uncovered through an anonymous trail of evidence. No one mentioned the maid. No one knew her role. That anonymity was her final shield. Lila walked away as the sun rose, carrying no proof of what she had endured, only the weight of knowledge and survival. She had entered the mansion as a poor maid, invisible and powerless. She left it as the one person who had dismantled everything it stood for. The truth had been buried in the basement for years, and she was the one who finally set it free.